Hello folks, Podbrew.com here. Me are Nepulse, Otalapor or Aquilor on all the social accounts or in all the games that we cover. So today I want to bring you some, not necessarily news, but trends that been happening in modern and standard in this past week or so. Basically, our main data for today is gonna consist of the results from the Star City Games Invitational weekend, which was standard and modern. And we don't not only have the top 8 deck list, we also have the best performing standard and modern decks for the respective portions of the tournament. And basically, I want to connect that with all that I've been saying before about the formats, and also kind of bring it up to the Pro Tour weekend this week, and just glue all the things together and see where we're heading with both of those formats. Basically, well, let's start with standard first, and I think it was one of the most boring standard top 8 streams for SG I've seen in a while. There have been a few, and this was pretty boring to watch. Just band company decks and blue-eye humans deck clashing against each other, and the games and matches were really just casting a bunch of small creatures and trying to get through, and I don't know, it really felt like I was watching green-white devotion decks playing against each other. So I had that kind of feeling when I was trying to watch that top 8 of the Invitational, and I just couldn't bear a lot. So I'm really hoping that things will be spicing up. I would much rather enjoy probably watching like mere matches of black-white mid-range decks. And I think for the Pro Tour, the 3 best decks for standard are some mono-white or splash blue humans, Band Company, and black-white mid-range. Basically, these are your top 3 decks, and the rest is just lurking around. I think blue-red control is very strong, the goggles deck, and if it would have been a bit more represented, I think it would have been part of this 4 stellar decks for the standard season right now. But it's not as popular as I think it should be, or it doesn't get as consistent results as other decks, something like that. But the deck is very strong, and I would love to see more of it, and I think we will see more of it. Some variation of blue-red goggles control. Yeah, and there are 3 Band Company decks in the top 8. What is it? Basically 2.5 white winning control decks, no, 3.5 human stack, basically, because green-white tokens kinda counts as playing humans because it does a similar thing, even though it goes a bit wider, etc. So yeah, I do like tokens. They have, it seems, decent-ish matchup against humans and band, but the deck probably must be tweaked a little bit more because it doesn't really consistently get through, whether it's green-white or black-white tokens. I do like the deck. I think it's relatively safe and it's strong. Alrighty, so this is your green-white token stack, and it's very basic. It does have a lot of very linear features, like 4 abbeys, you have hangerbacks, you have some planeswalkers, etc. And yeah, like this version is super solid. It's very square build. You have a bunch of 4-offs. You have a bunch of planeswalkers. You have all your cards are actually very solid and very goal oriented, so they all serve like this general strategy pretty well. It's a very strong list, but yeah, you definitely can tweak the deck a little bit. What I maybe would like to see is maybe like a few more flyers, or maybe more ways to deal with pull for opposing creatures. And in this regard, black gives a lot of good options. So yeah, you have like 4 declaration in stone, but that's just for some specific tokens or specific creatures. If you're playing against humans and then they have few copies of several different cards and creatures, you would want something to just wipe their side of the board. So something could be done there, because it's a creature deck. You can't really play Tragic Arrogance, for example, but maybe there's a solution somewhere out there. I really hope so. Right. Yeah, that's it. And then let's go to the best performing standard decks. And almost the same story there. Band companies recognize this just one of the best decks and one of the safer choice. Then you have some black-white mid-range and human stack. This was a mistake. I think this mono-red list, so we're not gonna count that. Yeah, humans, black-white, bands, humans, bands. So yeah, you see a trend here. And I'm thinking, like, how would you actually try to address this? And I think some aggressive tempo will be red deck with maybe Magmatic Chasm main deck even, or something like Boiling Earth, this 2 mana deal 1 to every all their creatures. So you could play that in the sideboard, probably in this meta, or something similar to it. Okay, we don't have Arc Lightning anymore, or any of these kind of trail cards, I think. Well, you have Avacyn's Judgment, but that doesn't really count. So yeah, I think some fast red deck probably has a good chance in this metagame. And then also some interactive deck with flyers also has a good chance. So basically this means some, I suppose, Esper Dragon stack maybe with more main deck Lanquish, even though Advocates may survive it when you have enough lands. So that's a problem, and you don't have Crux of Fate anymore, but then you have Outburst, which is okay. Then you have Tragic Arrogance, which is probably even better if you're on the Dragons list, because you get to keep Ojutai, things like that. And then let's say even if you play some Silk Wraps and Stasis Snares in that list, you can still play around this, around Tragic Arrogance, because you get to keep one of your enchantments, so that's okay. And yeah, it's actually fine. So this is what I would play in addition to some version of Blue Red's control. My own deck for standard is very rogue. It's basically also a company deck, but it has a completely different package. I'm relying on the elves and allies for a bunch of drain triggers, so this is where I'm heading in this format as of now. And I do like the build. It kinda plays out similarly to the tokens or to the band company lists, but it does a completely different thing. So yeah, it's pretty hard to be a more productive deck than black-white mid-range. So it's the threshold for controlling mid-range deck is pretty high, so the you have to be able to consider how can you top the game from the black-white or white-black mid-range. And yeah, I think Esper Dragons is one of the good directions. Then what else can you do in this format that I would actually consider a pretty good strategy in this metagame? Well, I do like Ram's strategy actually, but the problem is that without Ugin, with so many token stacks and decks that go really wide, it's gonna be pretty hard to maintain control of the board. So yeah, you might want to be not just mono green Eldrazi Ram, but splash some color. So if you look at human stacks, they have a lot of small guys, but the deck is very fast and very efficient. And sometimes you can get out of range of red sweepers because of always watching and things like that, and so on. So red sweepers are not guaranteed thing, but I think that's probably the best color to splash for the green ramp stacks, because red sweepers should be pretty good right now. By the way, I also really like this transformational sideboard from this white-blue human stack. You basically become a deck that I was just talking about, like the Esper Dragons. You kind of impersonate it a little bit with more sport removal, with negates, with commands, with Ojutai, with Kirin, with Tragic Arrogance as well. So yeah, so this is also important thing to notice. For example, if you're a human stack and if you have the blue splash, this is a very cool direction for the post-cyber games in the mirror and against other control decks. Though I'm not sure. I will definitely bring in this package in the mirror. Even negates for all the removals and the always watching. So I think like 1 or 2 negates is very justifiable. Plus you expect your opponent to actually set in probably some removal and some ways to kind of up your up their game compared to what you're trying to do. So that's the thing. Yeah, I could actually see some Jiskaya Grixis control with Chandra as well. We know that this one red Eldrazi list was basically a mistake, but yeah, some Kalitas black-red Jace deck will maybe be worth of considering, really, because it would be very interactive. You would have good finishers, good ways to control the board or stall the board. So Esper is not the only color combination I actually like in this format. Okay, moving on to Modern now. Well, these are the standard decks. These are the top 8 Modern decks. What we can see here, yeah, Absent Company is good, and a bunch of aggro decks like Suin and Fact. And then we have an Absent mid-range deck in the top 8 there. Well, for the top 8 players, it wasn't necessarily in the actual top 8 because they played standards in the playoff at that invitational. You have the blue-white top tiers gift deck from Jerry, which is a good deck, but I think in the deck tag he admitted that he made few mistakes in deck building because I think he misread the metagame a little bit. So yeah, he only has like 1 copy of timely reinforcements in the sideboard, etc. Last game against green and red decks. That's the thing. So while he was ready for Infect and Affinity with gut shots, but that was not the case. So I suppose he didn't really board it in. So that's one of the things you wanna tweak here. For example, so considering more reinforcements and such. Although at some local events, I think Infect and Affinity will be more common percentage-wise. So maybe it shouldn't be gut shot. Maybe it should be, I don't know, Purge, which I still like. So that's really hard to say what you want to take out here. Maybe these spells are enough, and then you can afford to cut this negate because you still have Muddle the Mixture, Spell Snare in there, and you don't really have to counter that many things. But yeah, he has only what appears to be 5 counters in the main deck, which is not that many, to be fair. His artifacts, gifts package takes half of the deck, so he simply doesn't have that much space. So maybe like 3 additional counter spells in the sideboard is the right number. But then, like, what else would you cut? You do want that Wrath of God in the sideboard because you just have 2 verdicts in the main deck, and you want that Wrath of God for the gifts. So I don't know, maybe Purge will have to go, but I can imagine Liliana coupled with Scavenging Ooze could be a problem, so things like that. But yeah, the metagame appears to be actually aggressive, and everybody's been ready for the combo, more or less. But I think at smaller local events, people won't be as ready as at this very seriously invitational tournament, where people really put a lot of thought and effort into figuring out the decks and cards to play. But yeah, before I forget this, I want to mention that apart from the decks that I've mentioned in the previous videos and then in the article everywhere, I would probably add Scape Shift and Absent Midrange to the mix of the good deck choices. I initially ditched Scape Shift, or put it like at the level of Hanging in the Air, because if you expect a lot of like Visions decks, probably with top tiers, even though Star City commentators mentioned that it's not a big deal, or I think maybe Jerry mentioned it, that counter spells are not a huge deal for Scape Shift decks, but I beg to differ. I might be totally wrong here, correct me. But if metagames appears that fast, but not like insanely fast, Scape Shift is probably a good choice, especially this straight red-green version, which is much more straightforward. It's much more focused, so less of durdling around compared to Bring to Light builds. So this is just like, I'm gonna have the combo very quickly, very reliably, and if you can't deal with it, you just die. Just a couple of omens, but couple of packs to get the Titans, and yeah, you have in addition to everything, expeditions to speed up your searching and stuff, and you have like a bunch of explorers while Bring to Light decks can only have space for Search for Tomorrow plus Tribe Elders pretty much, and they don't have space for Prime Times. Yeah. And if the metagame is gonna stay aggressive, then you probably want to be on this straightforward red-green version compared to blue builds, because you would have much more space for good anti-aggro cards like Angers and Balafs and Spellskites and so on. So yeah, and your deck will be generally faster, and you have access to Prime Time, which is basically a threat on its own, and then you can just keep on searching up Valakut, so you don't have to rely on just resolving, escape shift, things like that. And you're just much more consistent and faster than Bring to Light builds, I think, partially thanks to Omens, but mainly because you have space for so many ramp spells and you have space for Pact. Yeah, but if you expect a lot of blue decks, then you probably want to be on the Bring Light side of things, because then you become much more interactive and you have more game against a wider range of decks. So that's my impression. So yeah, enough about escape shift. Basically, why I want to mention Absent Midrange here is that I really like Jump Midrange as well, and Absent Midrange is actually very similar to that idea, to that package. And the main appeal of whites over red and those rock midrange decks, it's not Siege Rhino, it's not Lingering Souls, it's not Path to Exile. So all of these cards are good, but I think they're not gonna be absurdly really pushing the envelope towards Absent over Gent, even though Souls are good if you expect a lot of Infect and Affinity decks. But the main appeal of white in this rock midrange deck is actually Sideboard Stony Silence. Again, if you're expecting Affinity and Top Tiers and Tron, you want to be Absent midrange, not Jaunt midrange, basically. But if you expect a lot more of creature decks and a lot more fair decks with some let's say more balanced game strategies, then you probably want to be Jaunt, because I think Colligan's Command is insane, and Pulse are great against just creature decks like Zoo. I think you would much rather prefer that over having Paths, because you accelerate them, etc. So consider that. Think of like which end of the spectrum your metagame will be at your nearest tournament. I think that covers that. Okay, let's now talk a little bit about Absent Company, and then I'll move on to discussing the best performing Morin decks from that tournament. So this is one of the 3 lists of Absent Company from the players who did go into top 8. That's Logan's Mice build of Absent Company, and I think he's well known right now in terms of playing this deck in Modern all the time and being really good at it. So here's in all the 3 lists are very similar, and there are only very few differences, mostly in the sideboard, and very few in the main board. Basically, here's the difference compared to other decks in his list is that he has full 4 witnesses, but I think in a wider metagame, in a more diversified metagame, you would probably want to be like on 2 spell skies and 3 witness. That's my impression. And then the trend right now is to have Pontiff main deck. That's probably about towards top tiers, in fact, Affinity, and also Mirror. It's also like really good in the Mirror match. And Ooze is also generally now appearing in main deck, and the absence of voice in the main deck is also one of the trends for all 3 lists, and I think for the decks moving forward, at least for now. But most still ran it in the sideboard. His sideboard is quite different from the other list. I will show them too, just to compare. Basically, he runs 3 decays and 3 paths, which is a lot, but all of these cards are very good and very flexible, so not super surprised there. And then instead of running Thoughtseizes and Sin Collectors, he runs 4 Scholars there, which is probably okay. He just wanted to be safe in the dark. He didn't want to gamble, and Scholar is okay in a bunch of matchups. It's way more flexible than the Sin Collector. Scholar is actually okay versus Tron. It's good versus a bunch of combo decks, where Sin Collector is suboptimal. And the problem with Thoughtseizes is that you cannot flip it from company, etc. So you would much rather prefer to have bodies that you can flip. But Sin Collector is 3 mana, so sometimes it may be too slow in the matchups where you want this type of effect. So the compromise is Scholar, but it's still not the best card for the job. But it's basically just the most flexible thing you could have. It's just kind of stands in the middle of all the criteria for this type of card, for this type of deck. Then he has a Singleton Courser in the sideboard that is basically a slot for some grindy card against control and mid-range. Some people may prefer Revelark in this slot, which is fine. But Courser is, I think, maybe a little bit more flexible because you can play it faster, and it's fine against aggro decks, while still okay against slower decks. So there is that. And then his spicy tech, Varika. Why we see it? It's good in the mirror. It helps to exile the sword out of the graveyard so that they don't get to do the combo with the top tiers. It's good against mid-range and aggressive decks because you have a lot of small creatures, they tend to die, and then you can transform that into 1/1 Death Touch tokens. And it's also good in the mirror. It's like Linvala, but you can't kill it, you can't decay it, you can only path it or something if it's alive, if it's online, which is not gonna happen too often. But if there is a deck in Modern that can animate two color god, this is probably the deck. And yeah, let's say your opponent has Linvala in play, right? But Linvala says activated abilities of creatures. So if Varika is actually offline, it's not a creature. You can still basically fizzle their combo, so they can't do the Kitchen Finks Red Cap Dance with their combo package. And yeah, and you get 1/1 Death Touch tokens for the troubles. That means if the board is stalled, you basically have an edge because you keep on making good blockers that trade with all of their ground stuff. So you really like this card, but the problem is that your sideboard is very stacked. A lot of the times you probably just won't have space for this type of card in your sideboard, because you would have to run a bunch of cards for white metagame. For instance, well, Logan Mice didn't play voice in the sideboard. I think you probably want some copies in your 75 somewhere because it's just insane. And then I do like Revoker a lot. It's good in the mirror. It's good against top tiers. It's good against Tron, for example. It's good against some random combo decks as well. Because it doesn't target, so it's not like name a target card or something. Let's say if you're playing against not Absent, Jeskai Ascendancy combo deck and they have Sylvan Caryatid in play, you can just name Sylvan Caryatid and then they don't get mana out of it. For example, it's good in the mirror because you can shut down their mana dorks if you don't have the same ones on board, etc. Fulminator Mage, right now its purpose is not Tron decks or Skipship decks per se. It's more like anti-Naxos card or anti-other Manland card like Creeping Tarpid or Colonnades, etc. It's nice to have it in the sideboard. It's always decent, but yeah, the double black is an issue, for example. Then his tech, he has 1 copy side and 1 main deck, Archangel Avacyn. 5 mana is a lot, but the card is bananas in this deck, and yeah, the problem if it flips, it's kind of bad for you, but on the other hand, then you have a giant flyer in play. So basically, it's something a bit more powerful on its own most of the time than cards like Burnt on Force Tender and Dauntless Escort. So it's kind of like prevent your team from dying. It's just it's Avacyn, while it's more mana, but sometimes you can still court it out in some situations. It's crazy, but it can happen. But it's just a card that it's better on its own, and it has flash, so if you don't have a court in hand, you can still just flash it in like that, while with Force Tender Escort you would have to just play it or court for it to get good value out of it. So yeah, I really like this card. And then instead of Scholars, he played like 1 Thoughtseize and 2 Sync Collectors. So don't get too surprised by just 1 Thoughtseize, because it's effectively a third Sync Collector in this deck. It's just more flexible, so he wanted to diversify those slots a little bit. Otherwise, kind of standard. In his case, his Pontiff is in the sideboard, and he opted for Pride Mage main deck. So in order to be able to actually answer Foundry itself and not just the tokens for a turn. So this is another consideration. Otherwise, his main deck is also pretty standard. So also the standard is 20 freelance right now. Although I'm actually skeptical of triple Township and triple Canopy. Canopy adds up, so against aggressive decks, you hate if your lands are just a bunch of canopies. You take so much damage, and it seems like the metagame is becoming kind of fast. So yeah, I'm not a fan. So I like 1, maximum 2, but 3 and 3 Townships is crazy. There were so many times when Township actually screwed me over in the games where I had a very limited land count and I couldn't cast spells, and I felt so bad, and playing 3 is crazy. Even though you're gonna play 23 land, which is 1 more than a lot of other builds, but still. So I opted for 9th fetch land in the deck. Basically, it's your standard to have like 2 gardens, 2 tombs, and 1 shrine, and 4 basics. So this is the standard mana base, and then you would just mix up your canopy and township counts, maybe with some green-white fast lands. Yeah, I'm not sure. So this is a flexible slot in the main deck for such decks. It's either Pride Mage or Pontiff, or maybe like 1 or 2 Voice of Resurgence in the deck, things like that. I'm not sure what I want to run in those slots, really. Yeah, I think I opted for Scavenger News in main, and that means I have like one more slot for something interesting. Yeah, so I opted for Pontiff right now, but I'm not so sure. So for that tournament, Pontiff was probably fine, but I don't know what I want, really. There is a chance that I would maybe even want to play like Dauntless Escort main deck, things like that. And then actually cards like Eidolon of Rhetoric are not that bad, but if you're playing 3-4 hand disruption spells in the sideboard, then you probably don't need the Eidolon. So that's my impression. Okay, let's move on to the best performing modern decks. And once again, you'll see a trend here. You have John Midrange, Red Green Aggro, that's the permanent 3 Emissary beatdown deck with Bushwhackers and so on. One deck which I really like, and right now it's soft to some combo decks, but it's gonna punish everything else. It has a tiny splash for a couple Talias in the sideboard, which I like. You could maybe try to slice in something like Galactic in there too, because it doesn't hurt your deck at all, but it may help you quite a bit in some tough matchups. So won't be surprised about that. Then also this deck might want some Path to Exiles in the sideboard too, or some other good white sideboard cards, for example. So there is room for tuning, but yeah, the main deck is very solid and very standard and very efficient, I think. Vexen Devil is kinda strange, but maybe it's okay. That's the only questionable card in this list, I think. Eldrazi Tron is interesting. This is actually a red-green version, I could say. But it seems like he's... Oh no, there were Kozilek's returns, right? So yeah, I actually think this is the way to go. And if you want to play Tron, even though I like blue-white Tron version with gifts and such, but perhaps just blue-white gifts control with top tiers is a much better way for much better version for those colors and strategies. And if you're Tron, I guess the best Tron is still like probably red-green, even though it became worse. But you do have still Warblade and Nolamox, so you still have your land game. And yeah, I actually like Return much more than Fire Spouts and Pyroclasms right now, because there is a chance that you would play against a bunch of Absent Company decks and mid-range decks and Zoo decks where Pyroclasm is really not doing that much. So yeah, this is a good build. I really like it. I'm not sure about Torpor Orb, so this probably could be something else. But yeah, everything else is very solid, so I really like this list. For example, but yeah, Torpor Orb actually prevents Absent Company, prevents Restoration Angel, Kikijiki, prevents some other sick stuff. So yeah, perhaps it's worth it. Perhaps it's worth it. It's like just a bit more flexible than Rending Volley, something like that. Escape Shift, Zoo, Burn, Band Company, which is probably a rogue thing. The deck is quite okay. It's actually very different from what has been portrayed as a good emergency band deck during the Eldrazi winter. This is more of a retreat deck. Decoration Stone is kind of funny here, but I suppose it's fine. I'm not sure how good it is. Could be quite okay. It looked good on camera when I saw that deck in action. I like that he has a lot of good bullets in the sideboard, even twisted image for spread and consistency. Yeah, like he has basically very good sideboard for all kinds of cases, for all kinds of matchups. Real like that, he's like prepared for everything that could ever happen. Very interesting sideboard. So really good deck, really good list. So, and the guy I think finished like what, 9th at the Invitational or something. So never absent mid range. So yeah. Moving on, you will have to keep in mind Abzan and Jand. I think moving on, Jand is probably a little bit better, because we don't see much of Infect, we don't see much of Affinity, we don't see much of top tiers, and if this is what you will have to react to, Zoo and some company decks and some burn, etc., you would much rather want to be actually on the jump mid-range side, because both are better against opposing turn 1 Weldna Kettle or Birds of Paradise. That's pretty much the classic. So yeah, think of Jund a bit more. Your Colligans command still deal with Affinity very nicely, still helps you against top tiers package very nicely, and yeah, you lose Path to Exile, which is probably good in against Milira decks, but yeah, your removals are still good, and you get to kill the birds with the bolts as soon as you see them, because that's what you gotta do most of the time. But yeah, Anger of the Gods is awesome answer to Zoo and Absent Company, for example. One of the great cards. You're not really like that dead to Tron decks. You still have access to Crumble the Dust and things like that. You still have Ancient Grudge for Affinity. Yeah, your Infect matchup might be tough, but yeah, you can always just play like as a one of your own. Melira, for example, we still have Grim Levimancer, things like that. You still have a lot of removal between Terminate Command, Decay Bolts, etc. And then you could still have Knights of Soul Betrayal for Affinity, and in fact, your Piankir Noir is kind of your Lingering Souls go-to card, which is still okay. Maybe you just add a second one in the sideboard, things like that. So this is it from me for this time around. So don't forget to subscribe, check out the website, it's YouTube, Twitch, etc. It's not just Magic, it's much more than that. You guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.